Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode 186 of the Thoughtium Navigating Now Virtual Roundtable Series. I am Anthony Ewing, CEO and co-founder here at Thoughtium, and we are in the flesh live with Tim Jones.
Yes, I made it.
Perennial and favorite guest of the Navigating Now community. He's also the CEO and founder of the Leave No Potential on the Table. It is a movement. It's a community. It's a way of thought.
That's right.
And we love to bring Tim back to the table to address all things leadership and leadership development. We've been having a lot of discussions recently on leadership development, and we wanted to drill into today's episode focused on what are those new required leadership skills as we continue to expand within organizations, building and scaling teams, enabling our people, attracting, retaining, developing the right people as HR professionals, as L&D professionals, even as people leaders. What specific skills can we focus on that are conducive to supporting and enabling today's employee? And we know that those are a lot different than maybe even this time last year. So we're going to be focused on that. Tim, what's going on in your world?
It's a pleasure to be with you. My job every day is to help people navigate and narrate their journey to leaving no potential on the table. So family, community, friends, any way I can help, anywhere I can help.
Yeah, your leadership is almost permeable. It touches every aspect of your life. And as an entrepreneur, I know that is one of the biggest gifts of kind of running your own show is that you can show up authentically to your clients, to your work the same way that you would outside of work. And I think that's an incredible skill that you have. That's the way that we've experienced you. We've also experienced you as a true leadership development practitioner.
Yeah.
And again, we define this term practitioner as treating your work like an art form or a craft. So Tim, tell us a little bit about your art form or craft. We know that you're deep in the leadership space, but what would you consider like that aspect of your day when you just feel like you're in flow?
The aspect of my day where I feel like I'm in flow. First, my first 20 minutes start off with surrender. I can't be in flow if I don't surrender my first 20 minutes to God. That's that's how I navigate and narrate my day, by first surrendering. Then I get into the flow of being a dad, of being a partner, of being a colleague. But I can't do it first without grounding myself in the surrender to a higher being. It's my foundation. It's been that way for over 20 years. And it's the only way that I can write over 60 leadership blogs on LinkedIn. It's the only way that I can provide insight and and insights through a book called Leave No Potential on the Table. It's through that first 20 minutes of surrender each day.
Yeah, I love that. You are definitely a man of your word and a man of consistency. That's the one thing that we always say about you, Tim, and what we like to instill in our clients, and particularly folks that we work with on a coaching basis, is the importance of that consistency. And we'll talk about that here in a moment. But today's episode is all about new required leadership skills. And Tim, you and I have talked about a lot of different things over the years. I don't think we've ever been able to go this narrow in on a particular topic. So we're going to dive right in. And I want to share with you and have some dialogue around what are some of those specific leadership topics and skills that you're seeing are becoming more and more prevalent in your conversations when you are working with clients or you're working within organizations.
Well, I think first and foremost is 2020 revealed a lot of things to all of us. I feel like 2020 put this check engine light on all of our foreheads that was a signal that something is up. We're not well. I'm not well. We went from before 2020, I would jump on Instagram and scroll and try to figure out how I felt about my life by looking at other people's lives and be like, damn, Anthony got another job. Anthony has another client. Anthony's in another city. He's in another country. And then when 2020 happened, people became more transparent about the losses that they were taking. And so I was like, man, something is up. Everyone's in the ICU. So because the workplace is a microcosm of the work and the life that we live, those people were getting up in the morning and coming into work, which meant they needed a protector. They needed an advocate because they just survived the most deadliest time that any of us have ever seen in our life, called the pandemic. And so they needed a different type of leadership. They didn't need a managing director. They didn't need a CEO. They needed somebody, what we talked about during my first time here, not a supervisor, but somebody with a supervision that could protect them and shield them. Because here's the thing. Here's how the brain processes action or speech that annoys or angers someone. The brain treats it as a life or death threat. Not as you didn't have your coffee, not as my wife pissed me off in the morning. The brain is like, something is up and I'm going to either fight, flight, or freeze. And you don't want anybody on your team that's running away from you, that's running towards you. Yeah. You don't want anybody that's freezing and silent quitting, artificial harmony. You don't want those people on your team. And so that's the importance of the leader providing that supervision so that you don't lose those individuals who clearly had gone through something as a result of 2020. So they need a protector. They need an advocate. And I know we don't like to use that language in the marketplace, but that's what people need today.
That's so interesting. It's interesting how we have sat here on this show week over week, and we've talked to different leaders that are in this space, and we've asked a very similar question. What's kind of new and relevant in the leadership space? And you would think in this day and age, when technology is advancing so quickly, the advent of AI, the just rapid proliferation of information coming at us, you would think that we would immediately go to well, we need more technical skills. We need to understand these new technologies and harness these new technologies. But I will tell you time and time again, leaders that are practitioners in this space are immediately saying, we actually need more human skills.
Right.
And that was supported by even just this past year, a lot of research, including LinkedIn's own research, that showed that, of the top 5 desires and requirements for leadership skills, human skills became, I think it was 4 out of the top 5 for the first time in the last 10 years.
Right.
It's always been technical skills, reporting, data analytics. And now you see things like leadership and management, presentation skills. You see things like situational awareness coming into play. And so it's interesting that when asking you that, the first thing that comes to your mind is as leaders, we've got to be protectors.
You got to be protectors. You have to be advocates. You have to have a system for helping people hear their thoughts that have nothing to do with work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're going to spend, the data also tells us they spend the majority of their time with us. And so, they need someone protecting and advocating for them, and that will fight for them. Yeah.
So how do we train to that, right? If you were to, if we were to kind of unpack that overall leadership presence, and we would argue that today's leadership presence might need to be a little bit more of that supervision, supervisor, if you will. What are some of those specific skills that would support that? And I'll throw one of them out there. I mean, we're doing a lot of training right now on active listening and empathy. 2 tried and true skills that have been a part of a lot of leadership development programs, but maybe they've been considered, again, these soft skills.
Yeah.
They are truly required skills. There's a lot of one-on-one coaching that we are doing, even at the executive level, where we are encouraging our coachees to focus more so on leading with empathy, asking high impact questions, creating space. And I think with leaders at the higher levels of the organization, we're coming out of a season where everybody's eyes were on us to set direction, provide continuity, potentially shift on a dime and pivot. But we're now in a space where we've got to hold more space for folks. We've got to allow them to express how they're coming in. We've got to listen and ask bigger questions. So that might be one example. How else might we support our leaders in providing more of that kind of protector presence?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head, that being more interested than interrogating. This idea of discovery, who are you? What makes you tick? What are the contents of your character? What values do you have? How would you describe yourself during the pandemic? We had a conversation over lunch, how my time was spent in the pandemic. Who am I and how did I get here? And as a result of answering those questions, I got my first therapist. As a result of answering those questions, I read some books that stretched me outside of myself. So I think it's really important that we become more interested and less interrogating to the people that we lead and that follow us.
Yeah. I love that. At lunch today, you also threw out a question that you use in interview scenarios or in team building scenarios. And I'd love for you to share that question, because this is a real example of a high impact question that involves a lot of empathy. Share with us like the question that you find yourself asking folks to get to know them quickly or to invite them in.
Yeah, oftentimes during the interview process, we're looking to make sure people fit character-wise, competence-wise, chemistry-wise. And for me, I want to know, how are you like outside the lines? And so one of these questions that I ask often is, what's your strongest opinion about anything? And it's a safe place. It's not going to cost you the job. It's not going to cost you the relationship. But I need to know what you feel strongly about, what you feel passionate about. And ultimately, it should link back, or it's going to link back or point back to your values, what you value, what you're passionate about. And I've heard some great answers. And I've hired people based upon their answer to that question more than I did from the tell me about a time question that comes up all throughout interviews.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a great like tactical example of asking a high impact question, and one that we as leaders should feel comfortable bringing forward today more than ever, right? I mean, that today is such a well received question, because it fits the our culture, and folks they have an appetite to talk about what they're passionate about, and even as a little bit of like a vetting mechanism, if you've got somebody that isn't able to answer that with something that's, personal or passionate, that they're passionate about, that also tells you a little bit about, how they feel about things.
That's right.
So I just think that's a really, really good example. We're talking about new required skills in today's leadership and leadership development. We've touched a little bit on some of these universal skills like active listening and empathy. Maybe all of those roll up to, leaders becoming more protectors, more understanding, more inviting of folks. What are some of the other kind of required skills or competencies of a leader that you're all focused on?
Well, ultimately, you want to make sure that people feel heard, right? There was this Gallup poll released last year that said 50% of people that come to work are just showing up. Another 30% are truly engaged. Then the remaining 20%, they're miserable and they're spreading their misery throughout the organization. So that led me to say each of those groups are not feeling heard in some way. The 50% that are just showing up, they don't feel heard, they feel herded. They feel herded to your decision making, your mission, your vision for the place, and you never ask what they thought. The 30% who are truly engaged, they feel heard and not herded. So there is a feedback loop. You do care what they think.
Yeah.
You do consider. I used to finish all of my meetings with, do you have any advice for me? The 30% that are truly engaged, they enjoy that question. They answer that question candidly, and they've been thinking about it. The 20% that are miserable and spreading their misery, they don't feel heard, and they feel herded, and they're not being heralded. They're not being acknowledged. They're not being rewarded. They're not being celebrated. And so ultimately, all these things tie back to making sure people feel heard, that the hit song, that they hear their name or hear their voice on the hit song that took y'all around the world, sold 1 million copies, made you a bunch of money, and you get back on the way home, you're like, what's wrong with Anthony? Anthony's tapping his foot and he's upset. He doesn't hear his voice on the hit song. He doesn't feel like he's contributing to the overall success of the team. And now you got somebody that's silent quit or who is practicing groupthink. What he said, going along to get along. Those are the people. That's what happens when they don't feel heard, when they don't feel protected.
Yeah, I love that. There is a lot of additional research that suggests that more and more folks at every level of the organization have to have a greater sense of what they're calling agility, what we're calling agility. That word, we've been using that word a lot. I do believe, and in our experience, we're seeing that folks at every level of the organization have not only like an interest in, but also are required to know more about the organization than if they were just really focused on a single role and kind of like plug and play. And that's because organizations have leaned out over the course of the last few years. Organizations are running more efficiently, so they're asking people to play multiple roles. I also think on the positive side, internal mobility and enabling people to play different roles within the organization is now like a real retention lever for a lot of organizations. And frankly, I think the younger generation today, they're not as willing to just be plugged into, a hierarchy of teams within an organization. We talked at lunch about how, the org chart today doesn't mean as much to folks as it did, 10, 15 years ago. And so let's talk about this idea of agility and enabling folks to learn and understand more about the business than maybe even required for their specific role. Is that something you're hearing more about too?
Absolutely. I think they're looking for organizations and corporations and people who are bringing people onto their team. They want people with this high sense of awareness. And that is one of the leading skills that I hear about because we've been so distracted. We took a blow with 2020. And not just that, it is impossible to be aware if there is unchecked trauma in your life. If there is something that happened to you that you haven't gone through a process of fixing or nurturing. And there's this book called The Body Keeps the Score that talks about how trauma impacts us physically in different ways. And one of the main points that the book made was if we've experienced trauma, we either remember too much of it or too little of it, which leads me to believe that we have a difficult time finding a middle ground, finding a place where we can reason, the ability to reason. And if you can't find the ability to reason on a team, you're going to suffer from a lack of awareness. You're not going to be able to synthesize what you see because what has impacted you long before you got here is just bumping you along and taking you along the way. So people want individuals on their team. Leaders want team members that are aware. You can't be agile if you're not aware, because you don't know what's coming. You don't know where it's coming from. And so that agility is connected to a high level of awareness. It's all interconnected.
Yeah. I love that. The connection between agility and awareness. We call that situational intelligence or situational awareness, and this can be taught at every level, not just at the leadership level. Individual contributors can have a greater sense of what we call reading people and situations. Right. And again, that is not a required skill. That's a universal skill that everybody should have. And it came, I think, more into focus over the last few years. And so we're helping our organizations develop very specific skills that support this concept of greater awareness. And that is in a deeper sense of agility, a better sense of how I can influence within my organization. How do I have discussions outside of just my line manager and my teammates? Empathy, again, we go back to like the ability to connect with others and understand people's perspectives, and resilience, right? Like how do I work through situations that might be a little bit more difficult? And again, might not be just in my kind of functional silo. So I think for me, the exciting thing is that these universal skills can be used at every level of the organization. And we're seeing all the way at the highest levels of the organization down to individual contributor really benefit from things like situational intelligence, things like empathy and active listening. These are all the kind of new required human skills, if you will. I'm curious, Tim, like you're in a room full of leaders. What are some of the topics that you're bringing forward in those discussions? Like what's kind of the hot take that you bring to your leadership discussions today?
That we are in a time of being strong with the truth, but gentle with people. The telling it like it is dead. Jack Welch, God rest his soul. Steve Jobs, God rest his soul. That style of leadership leans on people too heavy to the point where they fight, flight, or freeze. And you can't do anything with any person or team member that falls into that category. So your ability to be strong with the truth. Look, we have some KPIs that we need to get to. We have an objective that we need to meet by the end of the first quarter. Strong with the truth, right? You got a job to do, but gentle with people, right? candor with positive intent.
Mm.
I'm not sharing this with you to destroy you as a human being, to destroy you as a team member. I am sharing this with you so that you can hear your voice on the hit song. And I think for far too long in organizational cultures, my way or the highway, I tell it like it is. I'm type A. My MBTI is this. My Enneagram is an 8, and so I'm strong. No, people are hurting outside of this place, and so now when they come into your place, they do expect their place of business or place of work to be a place of refuge.
Mm.
And we have to know that the times have changed. That's why people want to work at home, because it's a place of my couch is a place of refuge. Now, if you can simulate that, then you could put me on a hybrid model. If you can really make it good, then I'll come in all 5 days. But the expectation is that work would be a place of refuge. That's why it's so hard tearing people from the office that they built in their house.
Yeah. I love that message. Again, that continues to reiterate the importance of human-centric skills in our leaders today. I love, Tim, that we just went 21 minutes deep on today's required skills for leaders, and there was not a single mention of AI.
Oh yeah, right.
Single mention of chat GPT and technical skills, or replacing or augmenting our work with technology. It's almost like this inverse relationship as the workplace gets more complex and as we add more layers of technology. The need for more of these human skills becomes even greater. And for that, I mean, we're so excited to be on this end of that challenge, right?
Right.
At Thoughtium, like we really focus on building these human-centered skills in people, in teams, and individuals. And that practitionership will never go away. So, Tim, thank you for your practitionership in this space.
Of course. I think God created humans. Humans created AI. And so our ability to keep humanity at the forefront of the work that we do, I don't think it will ever change.
Yeah.
And I know AI is advanced, and I know AI is the future. It is now. But humanity exists because God created man, created woman, and then they created everything else after that.
Yeah.
So I know that goes a little bit too deep from what we're talking about, but nothing will ever take away from the human experience and our abilities to make human connections with other humans.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Just to kind of close things out, you reminded me, Tim, that you work with all different types of humans. We talked today about leaders and adults, but I also know you have a lot of exposure to the youth of this world, and we're just coming off of graduation season, and I know that's a big kind of time for you to be spreading the word and the language. What has your message been to the youth, say, grade school, high school coming up? Like what should we be instilling in our youth to get prepared for, this world that we're dealing with today?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is helping them understand seasons. And I talk about this a lot, just because, summer drifts into October. That doesn't mean throw out your thick thermals, your North Face. It doesn't mean get rid of those things, because winter is coming. And that's the same thing with our life. There are high highs and there are low lows, but it doesn't mean you should throw the rest of your life away because of a tough season. Right now, people are throwing the rest of their life away because the season is taking longer than they anticipated it taking. And that's my number one message to the now and next generation. Understand seasons. They're going to be highs, they're going to be lows, but you just have to endure it. And if you're in the low, you're going to get a high. If you up top, just know it could go down for you. But it's the model of a healthy life. Up and down, just like the activity of our heart and our brain. If they measure it, it goes like this. It goes up and down. Just like our life, a healthy life moves just like this. If it ever does the opposite, you got a problem.
Right?
You got an issue on your hands.
I love that. I mean, one of the just great things that we appreciate about you, Tim, is like your messages are timeless. So like the seasons message, I think is so important, and that could apply to the youth. It could apply to adults.
Yeah.
I always remember your comment about setbacks are slingshots.
Yes, right.
Right. I mean, these are all just ways of kind of like navigating and dealing in today's kind of world. And again, your message is universal. It works with the youth, it works with adults, and it works with leaders. So, Tim, thank you so much for everything that you do. How can people find you? And maybe more importantly, how can people get your book?
IamTimJones.com will take you to Amazon. IamTimJones.com. You can see some of my work, my speaking work. I am Tim Jones on Instagram. Timothy L. Jones on LinkedIn to view any of those 60 plus leadership blogs that I have that help people navigate and narrate their leadership. My job is to help people navigate and narrate life.
That's great. Well, you've done that for me, so I appreciate you, brother.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here in the flesh. This will not be the last time.
That's right.
I hope episode 586, you're sitting here with me with maybe a little bit more gray hair. I don't know. I can't speak for that. But thank you for being here. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode 186 of the Thought Team Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. We go live every Thursday at 3 p.m. Central. You can find this episode and all previous episodes at thoughtteam.com/live. Again, we want to thank all of those tuning in across social media, but particularly our LinkedIn community. And we wish you all a wonderful, wonderful long weekend. So long.
Thank you.